with the heartbreak and the hope you see there after that catastrophic flooding in Texas.
Hold
More
on.
than 80 people have died, most of them in Kerr County, Texas. That's outside San Antonio. We're sorry to say that dozens are still missing at this hour.
And that number includes children from Camp Mystic, one of multiple camps along the Guadalupe River. Many people are now asking, was there enough warning before the floods hit Friday morning? CBS Evening News anchor Maurice Dubois is leading our coverage. He's in Kerrville, Texas. Maurice, good morning.
Nate, good morning to you. The Guadalupe River just about 100 feet behind me here, but on Friday, at this very time, it was nearly 100 yards over its banks here, well above me and well beyond where I'm standing, uprooting all kinds of trees, leaving behind a trail of debris. Summer camps and campgrounds like this one, popular draw here in Kerr County, where dozens of people were simply swept away and killed after the river rose rapidly from all that torrential rain. Video from nearby Center Point, Texas here shows the moment the river started swelling. And then minutes later, the landscape becomes unrecognizable, submerged in the floodwaters. As the recovery process begins, many have expressed concern about the lack of early warnings from local and federal authorities. While flood alerts started coming in during the day on Thursday, the first alert warning people to evacuate Kerr County did not come until 4:03 in the morning. Most people obviously in a deep sleep at that point. Some blame the National Weather Service for underestimating the flood risk and for lack of urgent alerts. Others note that Kerr County does not have its own flood warning system. We spoke with one family, Carmen Jaime, and her 8-year-old son, Esteban. They recalled the moment they decided to grab all their stuff it into their RV, and get away from this RV campsite where they'd been celebrating the holiday.
I was thinking like, oh, it's time to go to the water park. No. The water park is outside.
You thought she was waking you up for fun?
Mm-hmm. But no, this was bad. This was a warning.
What do you think of this whole situation?
Scared,
Scary?
nervous,
What scared you the most?
the river rising up,
What did it sound like?
racking, all of that. Like tree branches falling off, like chairs flying, barbecue pits, everything.
Do you think we were going to make it out on time?
Probably not, but we safely did.
Brave little boy. His mom there, she has been a science teacher. She told him about the power of Mother Nature, and now they actually witnessed it firsthand, and they're simply trying to process it.
Texas is grieving right now.
Oh, wow. Ted Cruz is there instead of flying at the Cancun again. Shocked, I tell you. I guess it's because his house is not at risk of flash flooding, so he didn't have to escape. Shocking to see him actually doing his job. Yeah, maybe he had a layover. Yeah, maybe the flash floods actually didn't let him fly out with his private jet or something. Yeah, here, people don't understand how fast this developed. A time-lapse video provided by an eyewitness showed floodwaters rising over a causeway in Kingsland, Texas, completely submerging it in the span of a few minutes. Just so you understand. And we've covered this over the course of the past couple of days pretty extensively. 26 feet in like 4 minutes. But one of the issues with these kinds of like flash floods and whatnot is that oftentimes you get warnings and nobody takes them seriously. And usually it doesn't happen this fast. But the reason why people don't take them seriously is because like you get them all the time. Like I've gotten flash flood warnings in Los Angeles and it's led to nothing, right? And I don't know. I mean, here, let's take a look at this just so you understand. That's Llano River, not Guadalupe, but yeah, same principle. This is a 50-minute increase, but like, look how fast it goes from 1711. The road exists, okay? Look at this. Look at this. 1711 road exists. Boom. 1717, it's gone. Okay. It went from 511 to 5 by 5 from 511 to like 516. The road is completely submerged. Like, that's crazy. Is it because of a storm? It's because of rainfall. They got tremendous rainfall. It's basically like a dam collapsing. Like that's what it feels like. Yeah. The issue is there's massive drought. So then there's already massive drought. So then the environment is like the environment is already susceptible to flash floods for that reason. And then there's massive rainfall that follows after the massive drought, and the ground can't soak up the water fast enough. Okay? And you create this incredible condition where these areas that are known floodplains have a significantly higher amount of water that blow through. Here's some more footage of the flash floods as well. 4 videos: the initial wall of water. 2, 15 minutes after the wall, tree sucked under the bridge. 3, 25 minutes after the wall, flood at bridge level. 4, 30 minutes after the wall, floating house hits bridge. If you want to understand why the soil was struggling to absorb the water, try watering your houseplants that you forgot about and watch how the soil and water behave. This is also going to be an increasing problem whenever Nestle has sucked up water table dry to fill those fucking bottles they sell us. Oh, you mean Nestle. I don't know why I read it as Nestle. Yeah. Also, you have to remember, there are always people that turn around and say like, oh, these are red states, they deserve it or whatever the fuck. Obviously, they don't. Okay, nobody deserves this. I don't give a fuck what they voted for. I don't even care if they deny climate change. Okay, and obviously, that's not the case. Regardless, in many of these circumstances, you have like 40% of the state, some of the most underserved, marginalized communities that live in these areas that are literally voting for the Democrats. It's just that they're so disenfranchised through voter suppression and numerous other methods that it doesn't matter. Like, their existence doesn't matter. Just like there's 4 million registered Republican voters in the state of California. A lot of people forget that, like, California as a state has more Republicans than Republican states, like 3 Republican states combined. Okay? And in the red states, there's a fuck ton of Democrat voters as well. Not that party allegiances matter at all. It doesn't. Okay? Party loyalty doesn't matter, especially in times of like natural disasters. Okay? It does not matter. So I don't participate in that kind of talk regardless, but I always try to, I always try to make a note of this this kind of attitude that people have, like to immediately just to suffocate this kind of sentiment before it starts. It will matter to Trump, though. He will dictate it as if a state gets help based on state voters, sadly. Yeah, I mean, that's a totally separate situation. But listen. Like, look at this. That's a house. It's picked up a house. And is slamming the house into the bridge. How do you talk liberals down who have zero empathy for people who vote Republican? I have friends who continue to celebrate people's suffering. I mean, a couple things. One, liberals are very aware of I guess, like, marginalized people living in these places. This is an instance, like, these states not turning liberal is also a consequence of, like, voter disenfranchisement and not like some kind of issue with the morality of the people. Okay? So understand that first and foremost. Secondly, there are millions of people that, including children, but also millions of fucking people that are in these states that already vote liberal and also have oftentimes in these areas a higher density of black and brown people as well in these areas. What is voter disenfranchisement? Gerrymandering, making it seem as though, or creating an environment where your votes don't matter at all. Even if you are a Democrat or a leftist in a deep red state, creating new barriers that get in the way, creating new barriers and unnecessary hurdles that get in the way of voting. There are many different ways in which Democrats in red states and in red districts, depending on gerrymandering, could actually swing a state, but they can't. Not that it matters, like I said. I don't personally care about the voter, the ideological background or the types of voters that are getting destroyed in a natural disaster. Just like I always advocate for universality unconditionally when talking about what must be done in terms of like social safety nets, in terms of Medicare for all. Okay, this is the same principle, especially when everyone gets cooked in this process, everyone gets destroyed in this process, and it's very important for people to understand that, and it's important for people to also make an argument that isn't like weirdly unsympathetic for no fucking reason, especially when this should be an opportunity for people to educate people. This should be an opportunity to be like, first and foremost, it should be an opportunity to lend support and then educate people. Like, that should be the goal here. Like, this is yet another crisis that was avoidable. Okay. These things, like, we have the capacity to create successful prevention methods. We have the capacity to harden our infrastructure. We don't do any of those things, okay? So get mad at the real people that are, get mad at the people who are actually responsible for these deadly events, rather than victims of said deadly events. I don't share your optimism, unfortunately. Well, you should. You should suck it the fuck up. Even from a cynical sociopathic perspective, you should act as though you are empathetic, even if you're not, because it is utterly unproductive. Not only is it immoral, but it's also utterly unproductive. So suck it the fuck up and talk about how these are issues born out of climate change, and if we can't even handle the realities of climate change, we at least have to work to harden our infrastructure and to make sure that we limit the damage that these once-in-a-lifetime extreme weather conditions create. On the other hand, you have Republicans who are actively working on conspiracy theories, trying to move people's attention away from the real issues. Okay? You have the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world claiming that this is a consequence of like man-made weather modification or whatever. Okay? It's important to educate people. It's important to educate people in the aftermath of events such as this one, and bring them on board with a more productive solution rather than to leave them astray. Because that's how you arrive at people believing in chemtrails and cloud seeding initiatives that are causing these, or Jewish space lasers that are causing these fucking these natural disasters. Okay? Anyway, let's get to Ted Cruz.
The pain, the shock of what has transpired these last few days has broken the heart of our state.
Hasan, I'm from Lampasas, Texas, where we're currently experiencing flooding as well. My Facebook is full of Jesus take the wheel posts. I post opposing views all the time. They double down that it's not this administration's fault. They say God is good, and how dare I question him? It's insane. I feel like these people can't be educated. They're so stuck. Yeah, but for every person that you feel like can't be educated, there's definitely still going to be people that recognize that these things are happening way more frequently, and they've noticed that they're happening at an alarming rate and an increasing frequency and increasing magnitude in their lifetimes. And there's always someone you can convince. You should never give up on convincing people on what the truth is, okay? I don't, and you shouldn't either. Can you imagine if I was like, what are you going to do? Fuck it. Fuck these people. If I just did that, I mean, that undermines everything that I seek out here. That undermines everything that I want this community to do. You feel me? So let's continue.
As of yesterday, the confirmed death.
This fucking sociopath is like trying to come across as... this sociopath is trying to come across as though he's like empathetic here, which is crazy.
Toll was 82, and those numbers are continuing to go up. The children, the little girls who were lost at Camp Mystic. That's every parent's nightmare.
Yeah, also, this is a point as well, obviously. A common progressive fantasy is that once conservatives see the consequences of climate change, they will have some sort of come to Jesus moment, but it's always pretty obvious to people paying attention that they are just going to blame it on deep state flooding tech and learn nothing. But I think this is a defeatist attitude to have, because for every 5 people that will do this exact same thing, there will be 3 people that can be convinced. So you have to work every single day to convince those 3 people, to find those 3 people and convince them. Okay? I think it's unproductive to just like harden your stance. It's unproductive to harden your stance and just be like, well, you voted for this, have fun with it, especially when plenty of people there did not vote for this at all. And even the people that did vote for this are they're obviously first and foremost victim to the horrifying nature of these sorts of disasters, but then they're also a victim to the misinformation from the start. You all have family members, immediate family members, who are stuck in this incredible misinformation vacuum. You know? Think about it like that. Think about trying to convince those people, your loved ones. Because you never know. You know? You never know. One day something might stick. And I know that the government is never going to engage in this sort of like deprogramming, and that's already a scary thing to say to begin with. You know, people will go, oh, you mean camps? You want to do re-education camps or whatever, right? So you need to use the immediate relationships that you have with a lot of these people to educate them on the truth. This is a large enough community that we can make an impact that way. No matter how marginal, it's still significant. That's why I don't shy away from talking to people directly where they're at anytime I can. Now, of course, I still have my moments. I still have my angry moments where I just like pop off. But otherwise, it's always good to try and engage in messaging discipline and to be cool, calm, and collected, and use it as an opportunity to teach people.
Every mom and dad last week we were picking up our daughter.
Hasan, left side question. Why you let people speak ill of your name for this long? That's crazy. What the fuck are you talking about? Who gives a shit?
From camp here in Hunt. Our girls have gone to camp here for a decade. The Hill Country is an incredible part of Texas, part of the country. The natural beauty here is incredible. The camps that have raised generations of little girls and little boys and instilled character and love and faith are extraordinary institutions. And I'll tell you, the pain in our state, and it's every part of the state. You've got Texans from all over the state who were here celebrating the 4th of July. A week ago, this was a time of great celebration. You're dropping your little girl off at camp, your little boy off at camp. You're celebrating Independence Day. You know that your child is going to be swimming and canoes and horseback riding and doing archery and making lifetime friends. And then suddenly it turns to tragedy. For the last several days, I've spoken to multiple parents, scared out of their mind. Do you know anything? Where is my daughter? There's still 10 girls and 1 counselor from Camp Mystic that are unaccounted for. And the pain and agony of not knowing your child's whereabouts, it's the worst thing imaginable. But I want to say, in the face of all of this, it is simultaneously inspiring. Every time there's a tragedy, every time there's a natural disaster in Texas, Texans come together. Texas is a big state. We got 31 million people, and we have hurricanes, we have tornadoes, we have wildfires. Tragedies hit this state, natural disasters hit this state, and without fail, 100 out of 100 times when that happens, we see Texans coming together, helping each other, engaging in acts of heroism. There have been over 850 high water rescues since this flooding began. 850.
Cruz's a bad actor. I know. I mean, he's both a nefarious player here and also responsible. I met a new girl who believes in weather machines and all the classic conspiracy theories, but she's from a small town in South Dakota. She's lived her whole life. I don't blame her. Many of these people are nice people, but just misguided and are in an echo chamber of misinformation and wrongly placed anger and fear. Exactly. Exactly. Especially when you can like directly point to some of the initiatives of this government. This is part of the reason why I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot, but this is part of the reason why I get mad at the fucking Democrats. Because Democrats should be, one, immediately helping in the recovery and relief efforts, which they are, but also simultaneously speaking from every podium, every avenue available about how cutting the National Weather Service and cutting NOAA and the defunding and the austerity that this government is engaging in is so devastating, is so deadly. People are still going to obviously talk about how this couldn't be prevented. It's a natural disaster. There are systemic reasons as to why these natural disasters that are supposed to be once in a lifetime are happening with higher frequency, right? There's obviously that. And that should be talked about. Climate change specifically in this context. But then there's also the prevention and the infrastructure hardening that needs to happen, knowing full well that the magnitude and frequency of these extreme weather conditions, extreme weather events are increasing at an alarming rate. It's no longer once every 100 years. It's no longer once every 50 years. It's not even once every 25 years. It's not even once every 5 years. It's happening yearly. And at that point, it's just a normal part of existence, and we have to, at the very least, create some sort of protection to make sure that we protect people and to avoid unnecessary deaths. And it's not just happening yearly. Yes, it's happening multiple times a year as well. It's like That is the reality. And then on top of that, then at the last stage, we talk about the recovery and relief. Okay? There's also that aspect of it. Because on the recovery and relief side, the Trump administration is cutting FEMA, reallocating FEMA resources to immigrant detention centers, to build immigrant detention centers like the Alligator Auschwitz that they build in Florida. They're utilizing the National Guard they're federalizing the National Guard or utilizing the National Guard to work in these apprehension, these kidnapping operations of your neighbors. Utilizing the Marine Corps in this way. It's our priorities are completely out of whack. It's completely distorted. It's completely busted. And I think it's good to talk to people about that. It's good to talk to people about this and show them what the administration is tasked with doing. In the same ways that the Republicans will actively point the finger of blame at the Democrats and be like, oh, all they care about is like trans people. All they care about is trans people. Ironically enough, the Democrats don't care about trans people, but that's besides the point. Use Republican tactics in the same exact ways against them. Okay? They're nowhere to be found. And the moments where they are, they come in after the fact, after the devastation is done, and they turn around and say, oh, thoughts and prayers. Okay? Thoughts and fucking prayers. When in fact, their actions also led to the devastation and the impact being much larger than it should be.
You look at extraordinary stories of Eagle Scouts pulling campers out of harm's way. I was just hearing a story of one counselor whose head was right at the water holding up 2 mattresses with campers on those mattresses. That kind of courage, that kind of selflessness. And then they're the first responders. The local first responders, I want to thank every one of the first responders at the local level, at the city level, at the county level, at the state level, at the federal level. In the first few hours of this flood, I was on the phone with Governor Abbott, I was on the phone with Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, I was on the phone with Nim Kidd, the head of the Texas Department of Emergency Management, and then I called President Trump. I called President Trump. He was having dinner at the time. It was still early in what was transpiring. And I wanted him to know, I said, Mr. President, everything we're hearing right now, this appears to be bad, really bad. There may be a very significant loss of life unfolding right now in Texas. And I will tell you, the president said, Ted, anything Texas needs, the answer is yes. Whatever assets you need, whatever resources you need, yes, let us know, and we will provide everything. Within hours, we had helicopters, over a dozen helicopters in the air. National Guard, DPS, game wardens, Coast Guard, doing search and rescue, reaching down. We've all seen the videos of little girls being pulled up, hoisted out of harm's way. Incredible courage and heroism. Search and rescue is the first stage. But the process of coming together and rebuilding is going to take longer. And I will say to all the grieving families, to all of those who've gotten the worst news imaginable, that your little girl, she's gone.
Turns out Cancun Cruz was in Europe over the weekend. Ted Cruz caught vacationing as tragedy strikes again. The Daily Beast reports that Ted Cruz was vacationing in Europe as floods ripped through central Texas, killing at least 89 people, including 27 campers and counselors from a summer camp. The Texas senator was spotted visiting the Parthenon in the Greek capital Athens with his wife Heidi on Saturday evening. Brother, are you joking? Are you fucking kidding me? Oh, brother, busted again. Motherfucking Cancun cruise, this time in Greece. Oh my Lord. This man is, I mean, listen, guys, you have to understand something. As many of you work tirelessly day in, day out with no hope of a summer vacation, both because you don't have the disposable income to pay for a summer vacation and also because your boss will never let you go, you have to understand Ted Cruz is a really hard job. And he just did his really hard job when he went to vote for the murder poor people bill, okay? And after he did this like really, really difficult thing of voting for the continuation of tax cuts for the wealthiest in American society, while simultaneously murdering poor people by cutting off their access to Medicaid and cutting off their access to SNAP, food assistance programs that they need necessary for survival, he had to obviously take a big vacation. One that will never be afforded to you, just like he has a platinum healthcare program as a consequence of being a senator. You will never have that, obviously. His job relies on you. His job basically is telling you don't deserve that, okay? Something to also remember, something to also consider. But he had to celebrate. He had to celebrate with his family. He had to celebrate with his family on vacation, okay? A lot of you are being unnecessarily rude and ruthless to Ted Cruz. I mean, he had a really tough go at it, okay?
I will say for many of us, those are friends and neighbors who've lost children. Got multiple kids who go to school with my girls. The mayor asked for prayers.
Dude, this motherfucker is also like trying to be like, we're all victims here. It's like, bro, you were in Greece. Okay? Like, oh, we're all victims here. Let me tell you, okay? Me, Ted Cruz, I'm a victim of this flooding. You don't understand. Half of the people who live in that area, Ted Cruz literally voted to cut their Medicaid. You understand me? Like, that's coming down the line. Half of the people, he voted to cut their Medicaid and also has actively petitioned alongside the Trump administration to cut FEMA funding or to reallocate FEMA resources to, the immigration detention scheme that this administration is doing, the immigration enforcement scheme that this administration is doing. And after doing all that, which is, a lot of work, it's just a lot of hard work, he had to fuck off and go to Greece. Okay?
And I want to say thank you to the millions of Texans, to the millions of Americans, to the millions of people all over the world right now who are praying for Texas and praying for those parents. Going through this grief, it is going to take...
Do you think a Zoran-style campaign can work in Texas? Absolutely. Abso-fucking-lutely. It can work everywhere. It needs to be adjusted to whatever the expectations of the state is. But overall... The Zoran thing, the Zoran campaign is a national one. We saw this with Bernie Sanders, okay? Because Zoran, like the optics of Zoran in New York work because New York is a immigrant city, okay? So people are more susceptible to hearing this kind of left-wing populism from a Muslim dude who's Indian and from Uganda, right? Now, there are obviously racial hurdles that would make it harder for someone like Zoran to craft a successful campaign in a place like Texas. Having said that, it's not impossible. Even someone like Zoran could do this in a place like Texas as well, exactly with the same kind of background. But like I said, it's not Zoran's background that's important here, okay? His background can be a hurdle, make it harder to communicate effectively to as broad an audience as possible, especially if they're just like fucking straight up racist, or if you have like a female candidate, they have to overcome misogyny. Like these are things that just make it harder, but that doesn't make it impossible. And Zoran's importance here, Zoran's campaign here, is not who he is as an individual. It's what he said. Okay? He was able to make people realize that there is an alternative method out there from a campaign that actually puts people first rather than the interests of corporations and the wealthy. You can absolutely do this everywhere. Okay, there are versions of this that even in places like Texas that have started a fire, like the Beto O'Rourke campaign. If you look at it, like the initial Beto O'Rourke campaign that was like an underdog story was cultivated around the same kind of progressive messaging, had the exact same door knockers. There's a lot of people in this chat that live in Texas that probably found themselves awash with the Beto O'Rourke method and the Beto O'Rourke movement. Now, what he became shortly thereafter was obviously another establishment machine politician, and it failed spectacularly. But even the significant gains that Beto was able to make in a short period of time in the exact same style of like door knocking, that in and of itself, not 2020, we're talking Beto, 2018, I think. Like all of those, like that is that should not be looked at as a failure, okay? Because if Beto O'Rourke was a earnest, real progressive fighter, a socialist, okay, card-carrying socialist, he'd get back to work and he'd keep pushing and he would still focus on progressive policies, left populism, create a campaign around universality, uplifting the poor. These sorts of things are very successful. They're so successful that Donald Trump has lied about them. Donald Trump has lied about being this person, okay? So yes, a Zoran-style campaign can happen all around the country.
Love, it is going to take friends and family embracing and hugging and holding them while they weep. And it's going to take the church. With every disaster, one of the things we see here in Texas is the church steps up and the church helps and the church feeds and clothes and comforts. This morning I met with a group of chaplains who've been going through the incredibly difficult process of talking to mom and dad after mom and dad who just lost the most precious person they ever knew. And those chaplains are just trying to love them and show God's love. So I want to say we will come through this. To those in the midst of grief right now, that might seem hard to fathom. But
church should replace the welfare state. Here's another great take from this. Obviously, the initial reports are coming out already. Officials feared the flood risk of Texan youth camps were imminent, but rejected a warning system, deeming it too expensive. Okay? Officials feared flood risk to youth camps, but rejected a warning system. And Adam Johnson says, one thing the left, such as it is, needs to emphasize over and over is that local/state budget constraints are entirely artificial. They're manufactured austerity. If the federal government can invent $38 billion out of thin air to fund a genocide, it can afford to build flood warning systems. These budget shortfalls are not real. The federal government can invent money and transfer it to states for essential projects whenever it wishes. We simply choose not to because subjecting 50 states and thousands of municipalities to a game of neoliberal bum fights empowers capital. This person doesn't understand the point. He says local state budget constraints are real. They are. Except the federal government can aid and abet, okay? The federal government can always offer additional funds and additional resources in times of necessity. It is always a matter of interest. It is not a matter of, it is the biggest hurdle. The biggest hurdle here is never, where will we find the money? Because there's always money for war. The biggest hurdle is how do we actually reallocate these resources to these sorts of incredibly important and sometimes costly prevention methods? The conversation around deficits only become a serious point of contention when the expenditures we're talking about help the working poor. Okay? They only talk about how will we fund this whenever it's something that helps you out. The government literally only talks about how we're going to fund this. How are we going to fund this? This is so costly. Whenever it's something like you getting healthcare, it's something like you getting the proper education, it's something like your infrastructure getting the proper funds. There is never a question in either party about how are we going to pay for it when it comes down to funding war, funding endless militarism, funding all of these imperial adventures overseas. There is never a question about how we're going to pay for it ever. Every single year, every single congressional session, we increase the military budget by hundreds of billions of dollars. Even in this last Trump tax cut bill, the big beautiful bill, the big bomb for the working poor, there was $150 additional billion for the military. There was $175 billion for Trump's immigration enforcement scheme. There's always money for the military. There's always money for the police at the local budgets, okay? And there's always money for some kind of enforcement mechanism. There's never money. There's never enough money for these sorts of resource allocation initiatives when it's saving people's lives, okay? Here's the New York Times on this as well. As floods hit, key roles were vacant at Weather Service offices in Texas. Some experts say staff shortages might have complicated forecasters' ability to coordinate responses with local emergency management officials. Do not let these fucking assholes get away with it, okay? They'll say thoughts and prayers. They'll say now is not the time. That's the thing that I told you. Initially, when people ask these questions like, how could this have happened? How could this have happened? The first response from Republicans will be, oh, now is not the time. Now is not the time. No, it is the time. When is the appropriate time? They do this with mass shootings too, which aren't even fucking natural disasters to begin with. Now is not the time. Don't politicize this. Now is not the time. Don't politicize it. It's like you politicized it. Oh. You are responsible for these preventable deaths. You are responsible. If you are a Republican politician, you are especially responsible for these deaths. This is what you wanted. This is what you actively designed society around.
Will come through this. And I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to these gentlemen here who are working. They are not sleeping. They are working every day. Thank you to the families. Thank you to the Salvation Army. Thank you to everyone who is just reaching out and saying, how can I help? We will come through this, and we'll come through this together. Thank you. And now we'll take questions.
Senator, you talked about how no kids here, how you've taken your own kids to camp. Was it ever communicated to you that there was a need, that it was a priority to have a warning system so people had a chance to escape something like this?
Well, listen, I think anytime you're dealing with major rivers, there's a risk of flooding, and there's always been a risk of flooding, particularly on the Guadalupe River. I will say, in the wake of every tragedy, there are things that are predictable. One of the things that's predictable is that you see some people engaging in, I think, partisan games and trying to blame.
See, there you go. There's always a chance of disaster. God willed it. God willed it. God is great. God is good. We don't know the ways in which God works, but don't politicize it. I told you, right on fucking script. Right on script. Now is not the time, and this is a natural disaster. It is what it is. It happens. Okay? Dude, the entire purpose of mankind that has been able to go to the fucking moon, that has been able to build ginormous dams, that has been able to build massive skyscrapers is to overcome nature, okay? And yes, part of that hubris is what's causing these kinds of extreme weather events to take place because of anthropogenic climate change. But there is still so much more that we can do. Okay, there's still so much more that we could do in terms of proper prevention. Not building campsites and not building campsites around, for example, a riverbed. Or if we do, ensuring that we have the proper resources allocated to warning systems. Bro, we can conquer a little rain, I think. I mean, this isn't that. This wasn't a little rain. That's the whole point. That's why I gave like the Pompeii example, where it's like we just keep rebuilding in the ash cheeks of a volcano over and over again, and then the volcano explodes and the lava takes over the city, and then we rebuild the city once again, and we say, it won't happen again. It won't happen again. And we don't even monitor the tectonic activities. We don't even we underfund we underfund the warning systems ahead of time so that there's no evacuation. We just refuse to learn any lessons from any of this, and it's so devastating. Sorry, 10 missing now. How many dead? There are more than 80 people that have died so far.
Political opponents for a natural disaster. And you see that with a hurricane, with a tornado, with a wildfire, with this flooding, where people immediately say, well, the hurricane is Donald Trump's fault. Look, that I think most normal...
No one thinks the hurricane is Donald Trump's fault, jackass. Everyone says that the Republican Party has actively worked against, with the unlimited resources we have, the Republican Party in the United States of America is actively creating a more harmful environment, a more dangerous environment. I don't think that people behave in the ways that they're claiming. That is the Republicans that will say, oh, the hurricane is Joe Biden's fault. Okay? Nobody says natural disasters are a direct consequence of like whoever the fucking president is, unless you're a Republican and the president is a Democrat. Okay? They say these things are happening with a greater frequency and greater magnitude. We have to have the proper resources allocated to prevention, to infrastructure hardening, and to proper warning systems. And then we have to have the proper resources distributed back to the recovery and rebuilding efforts. That is what people say. And the Republicans have steadily created a hurdle against such things.
Americans know that's ridiculous, and I think this is not a time for partisan finger-pointing and attacks. Now, after we come through search and rescue, after we come through the process of rebuilding, there will naturally be a period of retrospection where you look back and say, okay, what exactly transpired? What was the timeline? And what could have been done differently to prevent this loss of life? And that's a natural process. I think it should not happen in a bitter and partisan sense, but it should happen in a reasonable sense of saying, what lessons can we learn? And I will give an example. Houston's my hometown. If you live on the Gulf Coast, we get hurricanes. That's part of living on the Gulf Coast as hurricanes hit. And I do think Texas as a whole has learned over time how to deal more effectively with hurricanes. And so you look here, we know the National Weather Service put out an emergency warning just after 1 a.m. and a second emergency warning just after 4 a.m. Now, obviously, most people at 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. are asleep. And so I think we will have a reasonable conversation about, A, are there any ways to have earlier detection? And some of that, the limits of a flash flood, they're very difficult because they can arise so quickly. But everyone would agree in hindsight, if we could go back and do it again, we would evacuate particularly those in the most vulnerable areas, the young children in the cabins closest to the water. We would remove them and get them to higher ground. if we could go back and do it again. Obviously, everyone would. The people in RVs by the river's edge. We know in disasters like this, RVs and mobile homes are particularly susceptible, whether a flood or a hurricane or a tornado, they're particularly susceptible to that. And so my hope is, in time, we will learn some lessons to implement to next time, and there will be another flood, there will be another disaster.
He's wrong. I mean, this is a lie also. This is literally a fucking lie. Okay? When he says we will learn from these lessons, his previous response and his current response, as a matter of fact, shows that he's not interested in learning any of the lessons. He literally said, there's nothing we can do about it. You know, these things happen. And then turning around and being like, oh, well, you know, we'll figure it out after the fact. We'll figure out what went wrong here after the fact. It's like, no, you're just pushing it down when it's no longer important in the public's eye, when it's no longer newsworthy. This is a defensive posture against. This is a defensive posture that is the opposite of problem solving. Okay, an issue happens. People seek out answers when it is the most prescient, and these guys desperately move the attention away. And delay with the hopes that they don't ever have to answer these questions. Okay? He's not lying. They'll learn what other publicly funded services they can cut, maybe the emergency text warning system next. Republicans have become so ghoul-like. I mean, they've always been like this, chatter. Yeah, you mean salient. Sure, salient's a better word. Yes, salient. When the issue is most salient. When people are actually paying attention, when people are demanding answers in this time of crisis, they don't want to give answers in this time of crisis on purpose, because if they were to properly analyze the situation as we have done so far, even with like the limited amount of information we have thus far, we very quickly arrive at the real villains in the story, which happens to be the fucking Republican Party. Okay? The people that are actively underfunding these systems of prevention, alerts, and analysis.
Next time there's a flood, I hope we have in place processes to remove especially the most vulnerable from harm's way. But I think that's going to be a process that will take a careful examination of what happened and how can we implement processes better in the future to prevent this same loss of life.
Senator, there were claims that the National Weather Service sent that first flash flood warning that should have alerted phones at 1:14 in the morning. But we have a federal public database maintained by PBS Warn, that says the first emergency alert wirelessly here in this area to Kerr County.
It's like, oh man, how could this have happened? How could this thing that I worked hard on, how could it have happened? I didn't realize when I cut the funding and advocated to cut the funding by cutting the fat, by trimming the fat in the federal government, that these already underfunded resources comprised of woke gay scientists were actually doing woke gay science in the form of figuring out when how devastating flash floods might look like. I don't know how this could have happened. Guy who literally is responsible for it.
It was not until after 9 a.m. That was more than 4 hours after the severe flooding had come to this area. Did you know that? Have you seen that? And what's your response, knowing the state and...
Yeah, look, he said the same thing in 2018. Senator Cruz, we will rebuild together because that's who Texans are. Surveys, flood damage in Burnett and Llano County urges Texans to heed warnings from local officials. When asked about the rebuilding process, Senator Cruz noted the bipartisan cooperation of the Texas delegation in the wake of Hurricane Harvey and the more recent flooding events. I'm amazed at the bipartisan cooperation we saw in the wake of Harvey. Harvey now goes down in history as the second most costly natural disaster in U.S. history, and we have bipartisan cooperation. First concern is getting people out of harm's way, Senator Cruz said. If there's more flooding that comes and some of the weather reports suggest they may be coming, then please take seriously if an evacuation order is given. Don't risk it. Don't think that you can make it through. They have the script. They have just the same script that they hit over and over again every single fucking time. Every single damn time. It's like the same script that they hit. Same footnotes. Same bullet points. Thoughts and prayers. God is good. God is great. How could this have happened? We will figure out how this could have happened, and we'll make sure that it doesn't happen again, as they literally work to make it happen again and again and again and again and make things worse in the process.
In NWS in recent months by this administration.
So I don't know the source for what you're saying. All of the public reporting I've seen is that there were 2 alerts that went out, one just after 1 a.m., one after 4 a.m. I can tell you, I talked about the partisan finger pointing. I think there have been some eager to point at the National Weather Service and say cuts there led to a lack of warning. I think that's contradicted by the facts, and if you look at the facts in particular,
look. Direct question. Let's see.
A.m. one after 4 a.m. I can tell you, I talked about the partisan finger pointing. I think there have been some eager to point at the National Weather Service and say cuts there led to a lack of warning.
No, those cuts were good. We saved so much money. Excuse me, sir. Talking about these cuts, you're kind of making it seem like I need to take accountability for things that I've advocated for, and I don't like it. How dare you, sir? This is not time for partisan finger pointing, sir. These cuts were good. These cuts were great. We need more of them. Also, how could this have happened? I don't like the facts that you are presenting to me.
I think that's contradicted by the...
Yeah. Texas Observer, Trump's Doge cuts are a Texas-sized disaster. Okay? This came out on July 3rd, 2025. Reckless agency layoffs and the dismantling of federal relief programs could leave the Lone Star State in peril. This was before the fucking flash floods. Right? I think. Like right before. A day before the flash floods happened, they were like, this is a ginormous issue. President Trump's commitment to energy dominance would seem to be good news for the Texas economy, but in the administration's reversal of environmental policies, including via the chaos of the Department of Government Efficiency trashing federal agencies, it is easy to overlook changes that are of particular importance to the state. On the one hand, our increasingly smaller window of short-term profit seeking seems to be in the direction, seems to be focusing in the direction of accelerating fossil fuel production, okay? And Texans are like, hell yeah, baby, let's suck the earth dry. Ironically enough, that leads to more erratic weather conditions, more extreme heat, more extreme drought, and then also more extreme flash flooding incidents like the one that we just saw. And then on top of that, because a lot of these resources, as I've detailed out, as I showed you in the Project 2025 reporting on this, okay, the reason why they're cutting these initiatives is twofold, the NOAA and NWS. It's twofold because those woke scientists are actively tasked with identifying climate change. Like their job is to literally look at this and say, things are going to get worse. But that's too alarmist for these people because they have to keep lying to the public and make it seem as though climate change is not real, that it's a fucking, it's a hoax, that it's made up. And it's woke, right? It's woke and gay. So they want to cut it for that reason because it undermines their overarching agenda of focusing on fossil fuel production. Part of that is because China has complete dominance over the renewable energy sector. So we have to do everything in our power to fucking continue working on drill baby drill mentality. That's good for Texans in the short term, at least like the way that they see it. But then also, their second reason is because they want to privatize the NWS so that someone who is close with the administration, another wealthy dipshit, can basically take over the NWS, which provides a service that is an absolute necessity for all aspects of commerce, so that they can paywall this stuff. And privatization of this sort, as we have seen time and time again, only leads to less efficiency. Okay? Efficiency that a capital owner understands very different than the efficiency of a service. The service diminishes, the service gets worse, but they make more money. The efficiency means someone can make super profits in the process. What a capital owner believes is efficiency is not necessarily good for you, the average person, okay? A lot of these things that the government is tasked with doing basically have to work invisibly. Like, they have to work, and they're working they're working in a way where you don't even realize that they're working at all times. Okay? You only realize the government is failing when it actually isn't working. You only realize that the government is there when it actually fails in a moment like this. So this is a really important time for leftists and Democrats alike to explain that these are resources that we cannot take funds away from. These are government instruments that we have to rely on, that we have to continue funding, and the Republicans' austerity measures against the war that they're waging against these government systems is actually deadly and will continue to have devastating consequences, such as this one that we just watched.
Facts, and if you look at the facts in particular, number one, that these warnings went out hours before the flood became a true emergency level. But number two, the National Weather Service here, New Braunfels is where they were headquartered. They had additional manpower. In fact, they had 3 additional people working that night, anticipating that it was going to be a very dangerous weather situation. I also think it's worth noting that the National Weather Service Union, which has been very critical of the DOGE cuts, has publicly said that they don't believe that the reduction in staffing had any impact whatsoever on their ability to warn of this event. And so, look, I think it is reasonable over time to engage in a retrospective and say at every level what could have been done better, because all of us.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good actually that we actually had key roles that were vacant. Like, there were people that took the retirement plan, the accelerated retirement plan, and the government did that specifically so that there were less people in these positions. Okay? They didn't like directly lay them off. In some instances they did, but in many instances they just basically said, "Hey man, we're giving you an opportunity before we lay you off. We're just giving you severance pay, fuck off," with no interest in rehiring. Here's the New York Times reporting on it. Crucial positions at the local office of the National Weather Service were unfilled as severe rainfall inundated parts of central Texas on Friday morning, prompting some experts to question whether staffing shortages made it harder for the forecasting agency to coordinate with local emergency managers as floodwaters rose. Texas officials appeared to blame the Weather Service for issuing forecasts on Wednesday that underestimated how much rain was coming. But former Weather Service officials said the forecasts were as good as could be expected, given the enormous levels of rainfall and the storm's unusually abrupt escalation. The staffing shortages suggest a separate problem, those former officials said: the loss of experienced people who would typically have helped communicate with local authorities in the hours after flash flood warnings were issued overnight. The shortages are among the factors likely to be scrutinized as the death toll climbs from the floods. Separate questions have emerged about the preparedness of local communities, including Kerr County's apparent lack of local flood warning system. The county, roughly 50 miles northwest of San Antonio, is where many of the deaths occurred. In an interview, Rob Kelly, the Kerr County judge, and its most senior elected official, said the county did not have a warning system because such systems are expensive and local residents are resistant to new spending. Taxpayers won't pay for it, Mr. Kelly said. Asked if people might reconsider it in the light of the catastrophe, he said, "I don't know." This is part of the reason why I sometimes say, like, it's better to just do it and not tell people that you're doing it.